I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're speaking with an inspiring author. His name is Anthony Candela, and he has written a book called Stand Up or Sit Out, Memories and Musings of a Blind Wrestler, Runner, and All-Around Regular Guy. This memoir narrates the compelling journey of the author from dealing with progressive blindness to embracing life's challenges as an athlete and adventure. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Prime 7 Media for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support writers like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his wonderful book. The links are below this interview. Anthony, great to see you here today on Spotlight.
It is indeed a pleasure, Logan.
Love the title of your book, Stand Up or Sit Out, Memories and Musings of a Blind Wrestler, Runner, and All-Around Regular Guy. You are an all-around regular guy. You're like one of the guys I grew up with, one of the kids from the neighborhood, that kind of thing. You've had some challenges, but that doesn't change who you are, right?
Right, as part and parcel of who I am is all of the challenges. And it's what I endeavor to explain in the memoir. As a matter of fact, how this is a total human experience. You can't separate one piece from the other.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a little brush with blindness. I was reading a newscast one day and my left eye just went black, like somebody pulled a curtain on it, and my retina had detached. And till this day, I had surgery on it, and they did a vitrectomy and this and that. I still don't see well out of the eye. So I know how tough it can be, at least in part, to lose your vision. When did you start losing your vision, and what was the first signs, and what was your reaction?
I was born visually impaired, so I have always had partial vision. And then it slowly progressed from the partial vision to total blindness. And for the condition that I have, this will not sound atypical, but what the rest of the world understands is going to sound kind of terrible. It took almost 40 years for me to go from being partially sighted when I was born to being totally blind as a middle-aged adult. And in between, I had to keep adjusting to the eyesight getting worse and worse and worse. My reaction, I can remember, I even write about it in the memoir a lot. As soon as I realized I had a problem, which was when they put a pair of eyeglasses on me when I was 3 years old, my reaction was to rebel. I didn't like it. I didn't like those things on my face. I didn't like the way it made me look. I had the ability to see a picture of me just a few months before when I didn't have eyeglasses on, and I thought these eyeglasses made me look ugly. So at age 3, I started having all of the rebellion and reactions that you probably would have when you're an adult. And there I was having them at age 3. But they forced me to wear the glasses, and then it became normal. And then my visual impairment and existing that way also became normal. And I stopped rebelling against it, except on those occasions when something frustrating would happen and maybe I couldn't do something I wanted to do. Then I would go back into that same psychological reaction. But for the most of my life, I've not been in a stage of upset or rebellion.
In many ways, since it happened to you from the time you were born, basically over a 40-year period, as you said, that was your normal, not seeing well, and then gradually going to not seeing at all, right?
Right. It's exactly right. And there's a large discussion. It's age old, but it still goes on because every time it gets brought up, it's almost as if it's never been talked about before. But people do talk about, is it better to have been born with your particular condition or disability, or to have had, quote, normal living for a chunk of your life and then have the disability onset occur later in life? And the advantages to having had your eyesight or your physical abilities into your adulthood is you carry a whole lot of experience with you. The disadvantage is that it's not normal for you as it is if you were born with the condition.
Yeah, exactly. when you have it, like we said, you've become adjusted to it because that's your normal. That's for sure.
That's right. That's right.
What actually was your condition? What happened? Was it a genetic thing?
Yeah, it is a genetic condition. It is called retinitis pigmentosa. And there are different genetic types. Mine is the autosomal recessive type, which basically means both of my parents were carrying the recessive trait, but they did not know it. And there was no family history on tracing back of the eye condition in either side of the family. So when I was born and when they finally diagnosed me, everybody was shocked and surprised. So the genetics of it are recessive trait for me. And the condition itself is essentially a deterioration of your retina from the outer fringes of the retina, working the deterioration toward the center of your retina. So as I'm experiencing eyesight getting worse through the years, what's happening physiologically is the retina is deteriorating more and more toward the center. It starts out with the outer part of the retina pretty much damaged and useless, and then progresses to the center of the retina. So consequently, my entire life, I've never had peripheral vision. The peripheral vision was gone right from the start. So they colloquially call it tunnel vision. And that's how I started out. And then that vision in the center of the tunnel got worse and worse over time.
Yeah, almost the exact opposite of macular degeneration, which starts in the middle and goes out.
Yes, yes, exactly.
How important were your parents in dealing with this and keeping you a regular guy?
Well, it's interesting. My father had one set of reactions and my mother had another set of reactions. So my father's set of reactions were, tough love. He was a former Marine, and that just came naturally to him, I guess. And my mother was a little like softer and squishier, the hugs and feeling bad about it.
Yeah.
And I think they both were racked with guilt because when they found out it was a genetically transmitted condition, even though they had no idea about the genes they might be carrying or anything else, they still felt guilty. So my parents were a mixture of love and softness and also hardness. I would say my drive and my accomplishments are probably more related to the hardness than to the softness. And then my chosen profession when I got old enough to choose a profession was in the social services, and that is a result of the softness that I was raised with. So I had a really, really good mix. Thank goodness for that mix.
We need that mix. I mean, that's what mothers and dads are for. Mom, my baby coddles you, and dad, man up or you're going to get the belt.
Exactly.
I mean, particularly in the era where we grew up,
Yes.
moms and dads didn't take it that easy on our hides, if you will. So that's great because the support system is very, very important in your situation, in all situations, obviously, but you had special needs, as they say, growing up. Tell us about school. What was that like in elementary school? And let's start there.
Sure. The first impulse was let's send him to the school for the blind in the Bronx. And that at that time, my father knew about the Lavelle School for the Blind. There's another school for the blind that was around. They just didn't know about it, called the New York Institute for Special Education. And that's renamed now New York Institute for the Education of the Blind. And they both still exist, but the impulse was send him to the school for the blind. This was because my parents and I were living in the suburbs about 40 miles outside of New York City in a little town called Haverstraw, New York. And the public school system just was not sure it could handle a legally blind child. So my father evaluated the situation and said, I don't want him living away from us because it is a residential school. and I don't want him to become institutionalized. I think he will be better off in the regular world, public school, and being raised at home by us. So I started out in public school and didn't have too many problems. They knew to sit me front and center in the class. In the early days of schooling, the print in the books is bigger. I was able to read using my eyeglasses. I even won reading awards, which is really, really good considering that I had a visual impairment, but I was able to do that. And they automatically said, okay, we made the right decision here. And then they also discovered that I was a good student. I started out a good student and I never stopped being one. So the early days were good. I suppose if there's any blemish at all at that time, it would be the teasing that I received from the kids, because they are always going to tease you. Some of the things they say to people who wear glasses, I got all those things.
Yeah.
The worst thing that ever happened was the Mr. Magoo character on television back in those days. I don't know if you've noticed, but they haven't really had those cartoons on the air in decades.
Right.
They felt that that was just too stereotypically damaging. And his condition was extreme nearsightedness. I think that's what that character was depicted to have. But that was probably the only blemish. And I got all the way through elementary school and into what was junior high school at that point. Now it's middle school. And, I took my lumps, socially. But I, got exposed to, in sixth grade, the sport of wrestling. And that launched me on an athletic career, which helped my social life because athletes are generally regarded in a higher plane by kids. And so that kind of helped my social life. But I kept going through school just fine and all the way into high school.
That's awesome. Also, the wrestling means you're part, like you said, you're proving your athletic ability, which is great. You're part of a team, or it's basically a club. You're traveling from school to school for the wrestling matches, I'd imagine.
Yes.
So there's a great social aspect to it as well. That's part of sports. And teammates generally look out for each other. So you had some people who had your back at that point also, which I imagine is nice.
Yes, I will if it comes up, relay a great story about how the teammates come, help you out. But to suffice it to say, it is a band of brothers, and we might give each other a hard time, but let no one from the outside say anything bad about a member of the family.
Great. Do you say you have a story about it you want to share with us? We got time.
I can share it, sure. So when I was a senior in high school, I had been wrestling through junior high school and through all the years leading up to my senior year in high school. And just before the season began, my senior year of high school, the school medical officer thought that maybe it would not be a good idea for me to wrestle because he was afraid that wrestling could cause me to lose the rest of my eyesight. I'm guessing what he was worried about was retinal detachment. That's usually what they worry about when they think about physical activity and it causing you to lose your eyesight. I never actually found out for sure, but what I did find out was that there was something going on, and it had to do with me and my not being able to wrestle. My father visited the school. There were conferences. Somewhere in the middle of all this, the wrestling coach, the head wrestling coach, said, "You either let him wrestle or I will quit."
Wow.
And so he quit.
Wow.
And now the information exploded all over the school because he was a very well-liked coach. He's matter of fact, my cousin-in-law is his son. So, we all know each other. He married my cousin. So anyways, the wrestling coach quits. The school goes up in arms. The wrestling team gathers all the students in the main lobby of the school for a good old-fashioned sit-in, which is something they used to do back in the in the 60s and early 70s. And there's the entire 2,000 some odd population of the school sitting on the floor in the middle of the main lobby of the school. No one going to class. The principal is there. and the wrestling team is surrounding me. And I still don't know exactly why all this is happening, by the way, but they're all surrounding me. And they're saying, we're going to stay here until our coach is rehired. And they didn't say anything about me still. They got us to promise that they would negotiate in good faith if we would just please tell the kids to go back to class. So we did. And we went to the office and everybody sat around. And still, I didn't understand why was everybody paying attention to me. But the principal said, we worked something out. The coach is back. We are all okay. Everything is good. It was after that I found out that this whole thing was because of me and the doctor not wanting me to wrestle. The doctor was wrong, by the way. My eye condition does not lend itself to retinal detachment. And I had been wrestling for a very long time, by the way, and it is a very high stress activity. So if something was going to happen, it would have happened probably a long time before.
It's wonderful that everybody stood up for you, your teammates and coach. That's an amazing story. That sounds like part of a movie where the coach resigns because you can't wrestle. And there was a lot of unknowns, I guess, back then also. The doctor just didn't know. So he was being safe rather than sorry. But the problem was this was something that was helping you find your identity. This was something that made you fit in, made you belong. And we all need that. We're all that kid who's picked on at one point in our lives, whether we realize it or not. You're too tall, you're too short, you're too fat, you're too skinny. You're never going to be good for the group of kids you go to school with, particularly in the era where you and I were growing up. Kids just were mean to each other, neighborhood bullies and all that stuff. So to find the place where you belonged is so important. I imagine that's a pivotal moment in your childhood, right?
There's a lot of those types of pivotal moments. And yes, definitely that was one. But just to keep this in the spirit of my memoir, especially the last part of the title, which is all around regular guy, it really is there are multi dimensions to this. And I wanted to wrestle because I loved wrestling and I loved the activity. And I didn't like losing matches, but I sure liked winning them. And I love the practices, and I love being physically strong, and everything connected to the sport. And you start to presume all of the camaraderie after a while because it's become the norm. But the thing that's most important is the loving of the sport itself. You can't do this unless you continue to love the sport, which is why when somebody like me writes a book about being a blind athlete, he has to be very careful to make sure that he talks about the sport and the loving of the sport. And the blindness has to do with, well, how did I do the sport? And were there any special considerations or advantages or disadvantages because of my blindness? But the one thing that I would like to impart to all athletes out there is if you love the sport, then you'll keep doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Aside from being a wrestler, you are also a runner. Tell us about that chapter of your life.
Sure, that was about let's say mid-30s. So it was a good 15 years after I retired from wrestling, which was my senior year of college. After that, I retired from wrestling, and 15 years later, I wanted to do something that would be both physically contributory to my well-being, but also psychologically contributory to my well-being. And a friend of mine said, you should join a club in New York City. It's a club under the auspices of the New York Roadrunners Club. And it's called the Achilles Track Club. You should come out and join the Achilles Track Club. And the Achilles Track Club is a running club for people with disabilities of all types. So when you go there, you see a lot of blind runners, and there's folks in wheelchairs, and there's folks that are deaf. There's folks with amputations, and they're all in their own way running.
Mm.
And I met the coach, the founder and coach, Dick Traum, and he's a lower leg amputee and from a car accident when he was a young man. And he developed a way of running that looks really strange when you watch it. He has to step and hop and do all this kind of stuff. And he evolved the Achilles Track Club. And I joined, and the goal was just run as much as you want for the enjoyment of running. And then whatever's going to happen after that is going to happen after that. But what happens to me was I fell in love with running, and I fell in love with getting into better shape and increasing my distances, feeling stronger, increasing my speed, and even starting to run some races and enjoying the extreme adrenaline rush of the whole thing, and looking forward to the next race and having that next race be the motivator for all of the practice and training in between. And when you're racing against yourself. You're not racing against a person, because only the top runners are racing against other people. The rest of us are racing against ourselves and just our best time, so we could get to a new best time. So I started to enjoy all of that. And that's when I realized that I really was a natural athlete. I had skills, but I had that internal motivation that leads to that adrenaline rush, that leads to that wanting to do more and more and better and better. And again, all for the loving of the sport.
Wonderful, wonderful. Tell me a little bit about your life in college. I know you went to Manhattan College. Tell us a little bit about that.
So a friend of mine was going there, and his brother, who was my age, was going to go there. So we went down to pay a visit in our senior year of high school. And I liked it, a small school nestled in the Riverdale section of the Bronx, a nice, quiet, almost suburban environment, which is really good for me because I grew up in the suburbs, and I wanted a blend of the suburbs and the city because I also wanted to take advantage of New York City. So here we are in the outskirts of New York City, and I'm in love with this place. It's got a quadrangle with buildings on all four sides of the quadrangle. And at that time, there were very few women on campus. The school was just transitioning over from an all-men's Irish Catholic college to a co-ed college. And there's brothers and priests walking around. Those were the professors. And I grew up a Catholic. I'd gone to religious instruction class and all that. So none of that was alien to me at all. And I thought that I was going to basically go there and just study and really get a great education, which, by the way, is exactly what did happen. And I would come out of there with a degree, and hopefully that would be the credential that I would use to go to work. And so I decided that this was going to be a nice, calm environment. I'd been around girls my entire life. So the fact that there weren't going to be that many girls around, it actually made me think, good, I won't be distracted by girls. I'll just study, It didn't take more than a month or so being at the school to miss the fact that there weren't any girls around. And then the population of women students started to increase and things normalized again. And we had a sister college about a mile north of Manhattan College called the College of Mount St. Vincent, and still there. And we had a cooperative relationship with them. I decided to major in psychology. I entered college as a pre-law student. My father always wanted me to be a lawyer. He says, this is a profession you can do as a blind person. There are blind lawyers out there. So I want you to choose a profession that you can continue to do if you lose all of your eyesight, which was the prognosis. And I knew it. So I started out as pre-law, but I immediately took an interest in psychology, switched my major. My father crossed his fingers and started praying that this was going to amount to something. and I went on. And a lot of the psychology classes were actually at the College of Mount St. Vincent. So I got to go up there a lot. And again, life was normal. And while I was there, I recruited my first human readers. So college students back in those days did not always get all of their books recorded on tape, which is the way things were done back then. Sometimes you could not get a book that was already recorded on tape, or you needed to read it sooner than the recording company could get it to you. So we just got human beings to read the books to us. And so the young lady I recruited was from the College of Mount St. Vincent. We were in the same class. She said, okay, now that you've convinced me you really are visually impaired, I will read your books. I'll read them and record them, and I'll read them for you, and then I'll read them again for me, and that'll be good. I will have read the material twice, and it'll just be good for me. So I ended up marrying that girl about 7 years later.
That's a wonderful story. Oh, she's obviously got a great heart. I mean, reading the textbooks once for myself was an impossibility when I was in college. So to read them for somebody else really means they've got a great heart. So that's a wonderful story there.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about writing this book. What was it like going down memory lane? And what do you hope readers take away from it?
So I started writing the book for the fun of kind of recollecting my life, and quickly I realized that I wanted to focus on the sports because that was a part of my life that was so enjoyable, with some ups and some downs, but so enjoyable that I thought this was going to be a fun recollection. And I was right about that. Recalling some of the victories was more fun than recording some of the defeats. Recording some of the running injuries and recollecting them was not as much fun as those races where I knew I had run at full tilt for the distance and did the absolute best I could do, and my body was working right. So you go through all those things when you start recollecting your life. You go through the ups and you go through the downs. But the more I started writing, the more I wanted to keep on writing. And so this is a writer's experience. You will hear this from writers that once they get into it, they start becoming obsessed with it. And that is when a writer knows that he's doing something he probably should be doing because he's obsessed with it now. And you need that level of motivation to keep on going. It's not easy to write, but it doesn't have to be horrible either. So I just kept writing, and the girl I was dating at the time was a writer herself, and so I watched her, and I got inspired by her, and I wrote and completed a draft, and gave it to some people to read, and they came back with all sorts of critiques and suggestions, and that's when I realized that writing can also be really tedious, and you have to be able to absorb the critiques, and you also have to be able to absorb the fact that they are telling you have to do a lot more work. You thought you were finished. No. So writing and rewriting and editing and re-editing are a process that I came to know very well in the writing of this book, and it was the first time I had attempted to do something like this. And I got through all that. Then I put the book down and didn't touch it for 5 or 6 years. I was living in California at the time, and I was busy doing the things. I was working, I was socializing out there, and I needed for this book to percolate in my head, I guess. So then after a while, I said, let me see what I can do to get this book published. By that point, around 2016 or so, I had returned from California, where I had lived from 2000 until 2015. And I was back in touch with people in New York that I hadn't been in touch with before. And one friend said to me, why don't you talk to so-and-so? She just published a book with this company called Christian Faith Publishing. And let her tell you her experience and give you the contacts over there at that publishing company. And one thing led to another, and they said, send us your manuscript. And I said to them, okay, I am ready to go. I can send it to you. And then I said, by the way, in the interim, I've also written a second book, a science fiction novella. Can I send you that manuscript as well? And they said, yes, why don't you send us both of them? And the next thing I knew, they had accepted the two of them. And so the science fiction novella I wrote, starting late in the process of writing the memoir and finishing it a little after I finished the memoir. And it started out as something I had entered in a short story contest and didn't even get an honorable mention. And my friend said, that's because this is nowhere near as fleshed out as it needs to be. This could work if it was a longer piece. And that was the birth of the novella. So there I was now with two books in the publication process at the same time, which is unusual, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. What's the name of the novella?
It's called Vision Dreams, a Parable. And so here's my memoir, by the way, for the camera. This is Stand Up or Sit Out. And here is a smaller book, Vision Dreams, a Parable.
Wonderful.
And this is about this is all me. This is all me. It's about a blind guy in a dystopian society who wants 15 minutes of eyesight a day, and the mad scientist that gave it to him, and then everything that happened after that.
Sounds good. Sounds very Philip K. Dick to me. You know, it sounds like very futuristic. Awesome.
Oh, it's with sociological implications. And I started writing it when we were involved in two wars, Iraq and Afghanistan. And I was thinking about dystopia a lot back then. And so that's what that book was about. Tell us
about what overarching goals you had for this memoir and what you hope to achieve with it.
Well, in addition to spelling out my life and enjoying the recollections, I had some social goals in mind for the memoir. After I started writing, I realized that my story being told to the general public could have the effect of educating the general public about not only blindness, but also about sports, and specifically wrestling and long distance running, so that the general public could actually know more about those sports. And then it would educate the public on how blind people do those sports. And then it would educate the public on how to think about this entire phenomenon from the point of view of normalcy. And that is the key goal, is to normalize the disability experience, in the sense that what we want people to realize is that we're all just regular human beings, or as I like to say, all around regular guys, and that we are simply and sometimes complexly experiencing unusual things, but we all have to deal with them. And that sometimes we're going to do well with this, and sometimes we're going to do poorly. Some days are going to be good days, others are going to be bad days. We will be despondent, and we will be joyful. We will be everything that every other human being can be, because in the end, what I want the public to always remember is that we are all in this together. This is a total human experience.
Anthony Candela has written that book, which sounds like it's amazing. And this book, which I read, which is truly amazing, Stand Up or Sit Out, Memories and Musings of a Blind Wrestler, Runner, and All-Around Regular Guy. It's a compelling memoir, and it tells the story of dealing with progressive blindness to embracing life's challenges as an athlete and an adventurer and an all-around good guy. Great book, great story. It's inspiring. We all have challenges. We all have to meet them, face them, conquer them. And certainly Anthony has. And this is a great reminder of how to do that. Anthony, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Very welcome, Logan. It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure's been all mine, my friend. And to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time until next time on Spotlight.